Philip, I need to talk to you.
Why?
We've been doing this podcast now, and don't get me wrong. I'm enjoying our time together on it, but
yeah, it's kind of a fun hobby.
That's what I'd like to talk to you about. The approach of hobby is just something that I'm not sure is entirely productive for us to be investing so much of our time into.
I mean, we're producing a thing, so I think it's pretty productive.
Are we? Are we producing a thing? Is that what we are doing, Philip?
Well, yeah, there's two of us here. That's plural. We is plural.
Okay, you know what? We're going to move past this, and we're going to discuss what I came here to discuss with you today, which is the idea of monetizing our podcast.
I don't even know what that means.
I'm not surprised. What I mean is that we could be making something. Wow, we're making something. No, what I mean is I have, through my own efforts, Philip, procured for us an offer for an endorsement.
An offer for a what?
An endorsement, Philip. Someone will pay us.
Are you trying to say the word endorsement?
No, I'm not trying. I successfully said endorsement.
How many syllables do you think endorsement has?
The appropriate number, Philip. Would you please listen to me? I am trying, with no help from you, to monetize and make something out of us making something.
Make what?
Money, Philip, money.
I mean, okay. Fine. We'll do it. What?
I don't know why you're fighting me on this. This is something that we could be doing. We get an endorsement. We make money. We make cash from it. Now you got Colin all cranked up.
You keep saying endorsement. $5 in the PDJ.
Oh.
Podcast douchebag jar right now. $5.
The fact that we have a podcast douchebag jar is in fact monetization, Philip.
$10.
I gotta go to the arcade and blow off steam. I'm all cranked up.
This week on the I Never Got Into That podcast, we're talking about the new girl.
Welcome back to the I Never Got Into That podcast, the podcast celebrating fandoms of all shapes and sizes. As always, I'm half of the hosting duo here, Colin, joined across the internet by Philip. How are you, brother?
I'm doing okay. How are you, man?
I am well. I'm tired. This has been a long month. We have not gotten to record much or at all.
Yeah. February was the worst.
How was the shortest month so long?
I don't know.
Mine was 82 days long, personally. I don't know about you. I'm already into the second quarter of the year and almost done with it. That's just emotionally, maybe, but here we are. And because we haven't recorded in so long, obviously, we have not done anything. Right? Not
right. Not in the
You
least.
have definitely not watched a whole bunch of television.
Boy, I have watched a lot of television.
Today's episode, we are going to get into the maybe the biggest modern sitcom fandom, which is New Girl, which I personally have had as a comfort show for a very long time, but you managed not to. Is this a sitcom aversion, or how did you avoid New Girl?
I like sitcoms. I will tell you, one of the things is definitely that New Girl started airing after I had ditched cable and just gone to streaming services. And so it wasn't quite the, I watch this every week and talk about it thing that sort of The Office was at the tail end of that experience for me.
Yep.
But after that, it was just, I mean, I tried to start it a couple of times and on recommendations of different friends and just didn't get into it. And so abandoned it and went back to like, yeah, I mean, I could watch this or I could watch Parks and Rec again.
Fair enough. I get that. I get that. This one, I honestly will say, I don't think anybody told me about. I kind of just got tired of Netflix recommending it. Mm-hmm. And I watched an episode, and it was like as soon as I had watched some of it, everybody around me was talking about it. It's like I had just gotten pregnant and everyone was talking about the glow that I have. It was crazy. So New Girl, the whole Nick Jess thing. And I was like, oh my God, how do you know that I was watching?
There's a bit in The Office, towards the end of The Office, where Andy has gotten a haircut and he comes in and he goes, "Who's that girl?" It's Andy. And
yep.
I genuinely, until I watched this show, I honestly just assumed that was a bit from a Broadway play that I hadn't seen or something.
Whoa.
Like, I had no idea what was being referenced there. And it just seemed like, okay, Andy music show tunes, something. I don't know.
I get that. I didn't realize the scope of this fandom until I myself was in it and then went, "Hey, Philip, you should watch this. We should do it for the show." Little did I know you would not have the same reaction that I did. Yep. We'll get there. First, we're going to talk about how we got to have a show. In 2008, 20th Century Fox approached Elizabeth Merriweather for a pilot. She wrote it, and they threw it in the trash. Then in 2011, she wrote a script for a movie called No Strings Attached, which was directed by Ivan Reitman, and it was the competing film. It was the Ashton Kutcher competition to the Justin Timberlake Friends with Benefits. And the success of that movie had 20th Century Fox come back and say, "Hey, what do you have now?" And she said she had a story about a quirky girl living with 3 single guys, and it was inspired by her real life, having spent 4 years in LA, jumping from one Craigslist apartment to another Craigslist apartment, and just the misadventures she had had along the way. Originally entitled Chicks and Dicks, it was essentially Will and Grace, a story about Jess and Schmidt, who became friends after their exes began dating. And other characters were brought along the way. As they were writing, they sent the new script that had been reworked after they brought Jake Kasdan from Freaks and Geeks, Brett Baer, and Dave Finkel from 30 Rock as showrunners. The script was reworked, the new idea of the 3 roommates as the permanent cast instead of the external friendship rotating through living environments. And they sent the script to Zooey Deschanel, who immediately abandoned her in-production HBO series to begin working on New Girl. And she was drawn immediately to the quirky, bubbly, impossibly positive Jessica Day character.
I can't imagine why.
The idea being that she is a unique, interesting, funny female character who would have been a very successful side character on other shows. She was also a producer, and her one demand was that the role not be the, quote, classic wife character ignored by the guys she's trying to keep safe. This is the most cringe thing for me about this entire episode is going to be the way they describe her as advocating the attractive dork. The tagline as they were selling the show was simply adorkable. We're just going to sit with that. That's this is the low point of the episode, ladies and gentlemen. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and it's going to get better. It's going to get better from here. I promise.
If you like both me and the show, it's probably not the low point of the episode.
This is fair. One of the interesting things that they did in this was as they approached what the show was going to be from a technical standpoint, they decided they were going to attempt to combine comedy and drama with the 5 characters, exploring the difficulties of the decade between 30 and 40, which is when many people take their biggest steps towards maturity in regards to relationships and careers. Which, as they said, unlike Friends, gives the show a built-in biological clock. Kasdan says, quote, their lives are moving forward, but they're still trying to hang on to some kind of crazy youth. But I don't want them to ever seem pathetic. Yeah, whether that works or not. They abandoned the sexual escapades kind of idea and became much more a show about 5 characters and more socially oriented, and changed the title to New Girl. Casting went on a very interesting path.
Did you just say they abandoned sexual escapades as a driving
the
force
show
of this
was
show?
Named Chicks and Dicks for a while. It was very Sex in the City.
But they think they abandoned that?
I would be interested to see the Showtime exclusive version of the show that they had originally apparently thought they were going to make.
Seriously.
Yeah, because these people live with abandon. The Dice episode alone is...
These are extremely horny people.
We don't know what it's like to be in our 30s in LA. You know, might be something in the water.
I feel like we know what the 30s are like.
I have been 65 since I was 28. I don't know what to tell you. Stop it, Philip. I am going to have a really hard time not just breaking into Schmidt while we do this, man. So Nick Miller, the character, is based on one of Meriwether's actual friends, who also just goes by Miller. She originally said that Nick was supposed to be the smartest member of the group, describing how he turned into as the everyman who's stepping away and commenting on what all the crazy people are doing around him. So that got changed.
Everyman?
For me personally, Nick is kind of my spirit animal, and it's that aspect of it that I love and hate about myself. I love the show for that. I hate me for that. Jake Johnson had worked on No Strings Attached. He is, I tell you what, if you're going to own a role, you can't deny Jake Johnson owns the role of Nick Miller. He had worked on No Strings Attached, and she really enjoyed him. He auditioned for the pilot against Max Greenfield for Schmidt. They wind up offering the role of Schmidt to Max Greenfield, and they tell Jake that he could have the role of Nick if he were capable of losing 15 pounds before they start filming. There's a really fun quote. Pause while I find. There's a fun quote where Jake Johnson talks about how he was with his wife after having auditioned and saying that they were going to get Mexican food to celebrate. In the car, he says, I was already thinking about what I was going to order. I was going to get chips, guacamole, a blended margarita, and a quesadilla for the table, and a chicken burrito for me. I knew she was going to get tacos, so I figured we'd do a little mix and match. Then I got a call from my manager who told me I needed to lose 15 pounds to start shooting. So I got to the restaurant and I had a chicken salad with no dressing. So then with Max Greenfield in place, the role of coach began casting. This took a little bit longer because Meriwether had originally written Coach as, quote, a fat Jewish guy like a man-child with dumb jock crazy rage problems. The actor David Naher, who would play Benjamin, which is Schmidt's arch nemesis. We built this Schmitty onto zero. He was going to be Coach. But then Damon Wayans Jr. was cast in the role after a surprise appearance audition. After he signed the contract for a New Girl and they filmed the pilot, he was cast in a previously auditioned sitcom called Happy Endings on ABC. That show was surprisingly renewed for a second season, and so they wanted to bring Lamorne Morris in, who had also auditioned for Coach. But because they had already filmed the pilot, more than 80% of it would have to be reshot to take Damon Wayans Jr. out of it. So instead, the producers took the opportunity to reflect on the frequent apartment changes of young people's lives and introduce Winston Bishop as another character. Damon Wayans Jr. would return in season 3 for an arc, and then after Happy Endings was canceled, he was returned to the show as a regular in season 4. That is how we get to New Girl. When we meet these characters, we have Coach, Schmidt, and Nick living in an apartment, in a loft together in Los Angeles. And Jessica Day, the effervescent teacher, has recently been cheated on by her man-child boyfriend and decides to look on the internet for places to live. And her supermodel best friend, Cece, helps her in making the interesting decision to move in with 3 strange men in a loft. There is our premise for zaniness. Philip, where did this show take you? Tell me about your time with the world of New Girl.
So I watched everything up to about halfway through season 5, at which point I was running out of time. And so I found a top 50 episodes list and went through the remainder of season 5, 6, and then using that. And then I watched all of 7, mostly today. And I will offer the suggestion that if I had begun this show partway through season 4, or if I had done all of my skipping around at the beginning and then started watching consistently after about the point that Schmidt and Cece get engaged, I'd probably have come away with a pretty overall positive view of this show. But up to the point, it's just...
I wish you guys could see Philip's face right now. He is exhausted at the recollection of watching this show.
It's a weird thing because I think all of the actors do a great job. And I think the writing is really good. Like it's so punchy and it's so snappy, and the punchlines are very, very well delivered and well created. I just don't like anyone on this show. Like there is no less compatible couple than Jess and Nick. They have no chemistry at all. Or if they do, it's all the wrong kind of chemistry. It's the, crap, what's the thing you mix hydrochloric acid with, the metal you put hydrochloric acid on and it goes nuts.
Did you just ask me a science question, dude? Like, I am the self-proclaimed
I'm Googling
Nick
it.
Miller here. I just told you I'm Nick.
I'm Googling it, Colin.
This show has forever changed our dynamic.
Magnesium. It's magnesium.
I trust you.
Put hydrochloric acid and magnesium together, and they go crazy and bubble and produce toxic fumes. That's the chemistry that Nick and Jess have. It's not good chemistry. And the fact that everyone on the show is convinced that they're like inevitable and wonderful, especially like towards the end where everyone starts talking about how it's always been Jess. It's like, why though? Why has it? And why are you rooting for it? Like, why do you want this to happen to Nick and Jess? Like, it's, so you got that mess. And then Coach and Schmidt are just, often very funny, but awful people.
Yes.
Like, Coach delivers some of the worst, grossest dialogue when talking about women. Like, it's truly, I'm not an extremely sensitive person. There are moments where Coach actively offended me. And then, like, half a season later, they try to sell Coach on actually being this kind of sweet guy, obviously because the actor was going to move on to something else and they wanted to bring a conclusion. And so all of a sudden it's going to like switch to, oh, he has hidden depths. He didn't just say that some woman was going to be riding Coach and his tray table would be in the upright locked position. Schmidt is very hit or miss for me up until the engagement with Cece, because some of the time you get this idea of a person that you can sort of imagine rooting for, even if I didn't like who he was. You could kind of imagine rooting for him. And then he spends an entire episode trying to convince Cece not to get breast reduction surgery, which she's considering for her health.
From the other room screaming, "No!"
Like, God. So
Yeah.
The only bright spot of the early seasons for me,
Let's celebrate him.
Is Winston.
Winston, the treasure bishop. Winnie the
Winston
Bish.
is constantly wonderful. And actually wants to be a good person. Like, this is my thing. This notion that all of them are trying to move forward while holding on to some aspect of their crazy youth. No one is trying to move forward. No one in this show is trying to move forward for the first 4 seasons, except Winston.
I would say that there is an aspect of it to Schmidt. He is the misguided. He has his definition of success, which is all about furthering his career at Astrat and making a name for himself in the world of marketing. And he is a great caricature of a lot of the people around our age who find their sense of self-worth in what they drive, what brands they wear, of how expensive their chutney is that they wash themselves in. There's a reality to Schmidt, and I enjoyed that portrayal because it's how I look at that. Maybe it's because I'm the dude who's a diner manager that's like, hey, I'm worth something, right? That you know, seeing that as mocked is kind of comforting, and the shallowness of that definition of success.
And I suppose it's fair to say that Cece is trying to move forward because there's a point at which the whole modeling thing starts to collapse around her, and she's sort of trying, although she ends up working for Nick. And I can't really think of something more tragic than being subordinate to Nick Miller.
Well, also for Schmidt, because he owns the Griffin as well.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. So that's, yeah. But yes. But it's just the notion that I'm supposed to be rooting for Nick somehow. I'm not. I'm rooting against Nick. Nick's he's just the worst. He's just the worst person.
There's also something to be said about our different tastes in sitcoms that are about bad people. I am a big fan of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and that is a cast of characters with zero potential for redemption. They could perform the perpetual acts of sainthood for the rest of those characters' lives, and they could never be redeemed for what they've done. So by comparison, this is a group of try not so hards that are, you know, I find comfort in the portrayal of Nick because he's the character who's just spinning his wheels, who fully recognizes what he could have become and is stuck in a moment of what he can never do now. The problem is, I'm with you on the idea that he kind of just sits and spins his wheels. There's even a scene where he talks about how he just is waiting until he can get old. He just wants to be 60.
And it's not even like he's the slacker character. Like, sure, most shows have the slacker character and the person who's like, because usually with that sitcom archetype, there comes some sort of, I don't know, zen thing. Like Hyde on That 70s Show. He's a slacker. He has no interest and no ambition. But there's a sort of like zen contentment in that. Nick is a slacker who's somehow mad at everyone else about it.
Yeah.
Like he is actively to blame for all of the problems in his life.
Yeah, he's consciously irresponsible. I was okay with the Nick and Jess relationship the first time around because I quite enjoy their chemistry on a banter level. And so the idea of them softening up to each other was kind of interesting. And you could tell it was that first go around not going to work. So I was very interested in how does this fall apart as it should and how will they grow from it? And then you get to the episode with the box of bills and you're like, oh,
right.
Nick,
what?
I am a person who is not great financially. And I just went, dude, what? And then
there's nothing. It's not charming. It's not charming. It's not cute.
It's especially not
and
cute.
Jess is not a bad guy for wanting to fix it.
It's especially not cute when you realize he also owes money to Winston. The dude you live with, you could at least pay your $487 that he wrote on your chest. Like, pay the man. And then the bartering down was pretty toxic. I'm not going to lie.
Mm-hmm.
The character of Tran, though, I mean, at least Nick has Tran.
Tran is amazing, and I don't know why he puts up with Nick.
He is maybe the best person on the show. I just want to sit with Tran. I love him. That fun fact was a pitch from Jake Johnson, who texted Meriwether and said, "What if I have a Vietnamese friend in a park who doesn't speak English, who doesn't speak at all? And his family gets really mad at me for hanging out with him." And they wrote Tran. And I think that's so
And then
delightful.
He does speak at the end of the show. That was very funny.
Yes, it's so delightful.
Okay, I feel like I'm trashing on this, and that's not my intention. Once it becomes clear that the writers and showrunners have an idea that this show is going to end, it started to become more enjoyable. And so I feel like if I had done my skipping around at the beginning and then picked up with like Cece and Schmidt getting engaged and watched it consistently through there, there'd have been characters in the loft who I was rooting for. And so the toxic garbage people living around them would be comic relief to the narrative of people who have decided to actually try and do something, anything. Like Schmidt and Cece pretty clearly reach a point in the narrative where they decide to do something with life.
Yep. Cece's boys.
And that's interesting. Like, that's actually interesting. The rotating door of who I'm sleeping with is not.
Right.
Other than that this show has amazing cameo game.
Boy, does it.
Like, that is absolutely a selling point of this show, is the just stellar cameos that they get to show up and play characters for a few arcs. Like, I adore Justin Long.
Yeah. As Paul Ginslinger.
He's so good.
And he showed so good back up for the Walk of Shame episode is delightful.
Yes.
And there's a very Always Sunny in Philadelphia moment because Jess being in his life burned him to the ground.
Yes.
That
you
poor man.
Kind of have the impression that happened to a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Dr. Nick, same thing. Jess comes into people's lives just long enough to convince them that they're not really happy.
Yeah.
And then bails.
She almost talked Ryan Gosinu to not take the absolute pinnacle dream job of his existence. Right? Like, what are you doing? Can we talk about the biggest martyr on this show for me personally, which is Robbie? Robbie,
oh my gosh,
is the saddest sack on this show. The story arc for those of you listening for Robbie is that Robbie is one of Cece's rebound boyfriends when she decides that the shallower aspects of her existence as a vapid model in LA are no longer of interest and things with Schmidt don't work out. She begins dating Robbie, and Robbie is just
don't work out. Schmidt destroys their relationship.
Yeah.
Like, not even, and you know, kudos to the show for doing the I'm going to date two girls at once and not treating it like hilarious hijinks.
You get one wife. It's the way the world works.
Like, it's just bad.
Now that is, if I'm not mistaken, she dates Robbie though after she and Schmidt are just hooking up. They are.
Oh, is that what it is?
Just doing the physicality, and
maybe that's where it is.
The overattached.
Well, that's crappy too.
And so he's in his "I will never stop chasing you." Not that that's less douchebag, but he's in his "I'll never stop chasing you." Robbie and Cece don't work out, and Robbie does not ever stop holding a candle for her. For some reason, becomes really good friends with Schmidt after he does burn the relationship with her to the ground after dating two women at the same time, both of whom are really high value women. Really high value women who are offering
such great women,
phenomenal relationships to him. And he decides he's going to be the worst of what our species has to offer as men. And finds a friendship with Robbie, who eventually dates Jess. And we find out that Robbie is maybe the highest value man on the show. Phenomenally talented, incredibly secure mentally, financially, and physically. He's an incredible specimen of masculinity. And then the most shallow and cheap writing I think the series has to offer is the revelation of that they are family. That is so empty and so bad for Robbie.
After she decides to keep dating him only because she doesn't think it's right for her to break up with him after she physically assaults him. Admittedly by accident.
Yeah,
but like the idea that that he's now like a charity case because I hurt him physically, so I can't now hurt him emotionally. So I'm just going to lie to him for a while.
It's hashtag Robbie deserved better. That's all. That's
for real.
Robbie is the martyr.
There's really not anyone Jess dated who doesn't.
that is true. Boy, you know, we didn't see how he was after the breakup, so I hope the best for Ryan.
I guess her initial boyfriend, he does not.
Is he the reason she became that way? Is it?
Maybe so.
Is it his fault?
Maybe he. Yeah, I don't know. Something.
Ugh.
Like when we anyway. So, yeah, Jess is a terrible, destructive force in people's lives. So you start to see that, and then you see Winston go for his ambition of becoming a police officer. And that is a really cool arc. He manages it in spite of the fact that his friends work really, really hard to destroy it.
Sabotage him every step of the way.
Yes.
Yeah. Although I do have to say, I think the episode where the chief is going to come do the home inspection, and Jess believes that she has a bag of meth from a thrifted piece of furniture is a brilliant episode.
Objectively hilarious.
It is
that is an objectively hilarious episode.
The physical comedy, the snappy writing.
It's so good.
The callbacks. That's the episode that calls back Sweatback Nick, who can't tell a lie without his back getting drenched in sweat. It's a great fan service bottle episode. It's wonderful.
It really is. Yes, it really is. But that's what I'm saying is those kinds of episodes work because they're happening in the course of the characters actually trying to do anything. And so from that point forward, the show I thought was really quite good. My problem is that I felt like I had to get through 4 seasons before I could like this show. And now, to be fair, if you haven't seen this show and you find that you don't like the first few episodes, just skip to season 4. You have not missed character development or narratively important plot points. Like, this is a truly episodic show. I don't mean that in like, I'm not trying to like, again, I don't mean that as trashing on it. This is a genuinely episodic series.
Yep.
That almost, I mean, there's, shifts in who's in the relationships and things like that, but it's a genuinely episodic series. So if you started at season 4, you will not be lost. You will figure it out pretty quickly. And had I done so, I'd have liked this show more because, again, all the technical aspects of this show are fantastic. The writing, the scripts, the acting, it's great. It's really well done. And starting about halfway through season 4, you were able to start liking some of the characters. It is hard to get past the fact that the 2 characters that I'm supposed to have a will they, won't they, whoa, when will they get together? Oh, relationship with, I hate. I hate them. Like, let me be clear. Russell's obviously not been a great husband in his life.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, it becomes kind of a joke by that point where he's had 5 wives.
But he has a great desk.
He does have a great office. But I'm absolutely rooting for Russell in that episode.
Oh no, Russ, he would be burnt to the ground by Jess, and I don't want that for him.
No, because he wasn't. He and Jess dated, and he survived.
He did.
He's the only person capable of surviving Jess.
Hurricane Jess.
Also, let me just say, in that episode, they get they get past Russell's attempt to win her back, and his argument that she doesn't belong with with Nick, all valid points. And then Nick's attempt to attack him, and Russell's obvious ability to fight off all 3 of the men in Jess's life.
So bad.
With so no difficulty.
It's so bad.
In spite of being their age plus 50%.
Yes.
And one of them being a police officer.
Who lifted a car off of a child. Don't forget.
In spite of all that, like, at the end of that, she and Nick are talking. She says, and I just lost my job. No, she didn't. He didn't fire her.
Yeah.
Like, he was assaulted at her wedding and he did not fire her. And when Allie goes into labor, he stops everything to drive all of them to the hospital.
Yeah.
And then gives Tran a ride to wherever
Tran is going. Wherever he returns to, wherever he abodes.
And so what I'm saying is, obviously, Russell's got 6 failed marriages, and at a certain point, you've got to ask the common denominator in all of your failed relationships maybe is you.
Yep.
But he's objectively the best human being in that episode.
Yeah.
Yes. So 100% Team Russell, except in the fact that I don't really think he deserves to endure Jess. There are better people at that wedding for him to date. He'd probably get along great with Nick's mom. I don't know. But
probably get along great with Jess's mom.
That's true. That's who I meant. Not
That'd
Nick's
be
mom.
it. I mean, we know Nick's mom, but she's probably still
Nick's mom is also
listening to Elvis songs.
So like, I really did start to enjoy the show as it got into the once Cece and Schmidt became a story that was worth watching. And I appreciate taking time to get there because sure. Schmidt that we meet in episode 1, and for that matter, Cece that we meet in episode 1, are not people who are going to be able to have a healthy marriage or raise a child. And so I have no idea when they decided that that's where that was going to end up. But credit to the show for taking the time to write those characters a little piece at a time to that point. But yeah, I would say that becomes worth watching because they are actually they're a couple worth rooting for. Like even when they behave stupidly, it's obvious that they actually do work with each other. And that when they're together and Schmidt's not being a dingus, they are actually good for each other. Like both of them ground each other in an interesting way. And the chemistry between those actors is amazing.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. And so once I was able to root for Schmidt and Cece and didn't expect to be rooting, what didn't seem like the show was demanding me to root for Jess and Nick, it was pretty good. But I actually did to my last Russell point, when Russell calls Jess into a room to talk to her and intends to offer her a job, and she like launches in the super narcissistic way of, you want to talk to me about Nick. And Russell says, I can't imagine wanting to spend one more second of my day, let alone my life, hearing about you and Nick. I actually imitated the reaction gif of Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the TV. Yep. Right there.
Okay. So here.
So I love Schmidt and Cece. I love Winston and Allie. Allie is amazing.
She's delightful. The Allie, for again those listening, is played by Nasim Pedrad. She is Winston's partner as a police officer who will evolve into his wife and the mother of his child, and she is delightful. Okay, here I go. I'm going to try very poorly. For those of you listening, Philip has always been the smarter of our duo here. He is better at that. I am no less passionate of an individual, so I am going to counterpoint him.
Also, Colin's cooler than me.
I completely do not anticipate success in this attempt, but I'm going to go for it because I'm going to sell you, the listener, on the show, hopefully, and maybe turn a little bit of Philip's frown upside down if I'm capable. My argument is, first and foremost, while Philip has just said that he struggled through the first 4 seasons, you will hear that we did giggle quite a bit. The show is undeniably, objectively funny. Not necessarily great, but as you heard him say, this is a show that I think future sitcom writers have and could learn from in how to land a joke and how to set up a long-term payoff for a joke. If you're going to watch the show at any point, I won't spoil it for you, but getting ronded is something that takes us months or takes us the years of this show's existence to fully reach its payoff. We referenced Back Sweat Nick. These jokes landing, the punches hitting, they get there every time. That being said, here's my big argument for New Girl. And I will use this time to not argue against anything Philip said because he's right. But two people can be right at the same time. I think that knowing that they took the approach of having a biological clock to the show is a very interesting thing to know. Because if you start the show on Netflix now, you know that you have 7 seasons. The last one, kind of a reunion special, kind of years later. Where are they now? Season. So the first 3 up to almost 4 seasons, I don't think we have a collection of characters. I think we have a highly relatable and impossible to be satisfied with set of caricatures of different aspects of what it is to be an American in their 30s. The insecurities, the struggles, the celebration of victories that don't deserve celebration, the struggles with losses that really aren't even the setbacks that we force them to be, and a ultimate challenge to accept that most of our setbacks in life are due to our own choices, which is something that I think we as a society should probably pay more attention to, because I am the biggest victim of myself. And I don't think that I am alone in this circumstance. With that biological clock being set in place, we start to get these caricatures evolving into characters. We start to see growth in things. After Schmidt loses both of his women, he does not change for the better. He wallows. He immediately places the blame on Jess and Nick. He jumps from being the worst character on the show to date into being a victim of someone else rather than the acceptance of responsibility. And when he does make that change, and he speaks to Winston a full season of the show later and talks about how he cost himself the woman he knows he should be with, there's a switch that flips him into a character. And we are no longer with the kind of Schmidt who is going to celebrate taking a cast off of his broken manhood, but instead someone who is going to redefine what he wants out of his existence and redefine his own manhood. I love that there is not a need to skip.
So mad at you about that line.
First,
so mad at you about that line.
That's good.
PDJ, $5 right now.
The podcast douchebag jar is going to be very expensive for me. I love that this show does not show intentional success for all of its characters. And that not all of the evolution that we do see in the characters is voluntary. We see a lot of character growth happen in the later scenes through acceptance of their own maturity and of their own responsibility in the world. And you are completely correct. Nick, not one of them. Knowing the quote from Elizabeth Merriweather that Jess was written like she would have been a side character or a supporting character on another show, I think that's valid because she is the same person in the last episode that she is in the first episode. And for what it's worth, the New Girl is my least favorite character on New Girl. And her will they, won't they, ooh, as Philip said, is a very enjoyable, terrible side character. He is this show's debauched Kramer. There's never a need to evolve, but he's correct in that the tone shows that you should cheer for him. Having found myself forced into my own maturity in life, it's hard to celebrate someone who is consciously choosing to not mature. But if we take them out, I love the journey of this show. My only regret is that I wish that of all the people that cheerlead for Jess and Nick to get together, that Prince wouldn't have been one of them. Because I can't argue with Prince. I just think he's right in everything he's ever said.
Prince was a very good cameo. So okay. Here's my objection. You spent almost half the show's runtime before you had even one of your principal characters decide to actively make a change for the better.
If we don't count Winston as a core character, because from the moment he returns, he goes to be a radio DJ and moves his way up there, becomes a child caregiver and excels in that world and finds his calling.
Winston fails forward on a lot of things.
But he is a constant work in progress and intentionally so.
Sure. Yes. But I mean, sure. I don't feel like, though, we see, except in little flashes, and I think him as a babysitter, which we decided to make fun of him for later in the show.
I don't know why. He was great for that kid, and that kid was great for him.
He's amazing.
And
I can't believe they stopped.
Can we celebrate what a wonderful adult-child dynamic was shown in the show? Yes. That was beautiful.
It's so good. Wonderful. Yes. And I hate that they ended that arc. That was such a good thing for him.
I thought he was going to be a social worker. That's where I thought he was headed.
Yes.
He would have been amazing.
So, yeah. And just feel like we spent almost half of the show's runtime waiting for a character to even start to get it. And then we spent the other half following that. And that's, I mean, and it was interesting to follow that. But that makes the first half of the show 80% a little bit painful. And then again, the whole, you had to premise your argument if we remove the two characters who have the best claim on being the main characters.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I will surrender that point.
Like that, you know what? Nick and Jess probably would be really great side characters. But there's a reason they would be really great side characters. And I don't understand what would make someone as a writer decide, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make Seinfeld, but from Kramer's perspective.
I'm very excited for the listener to remember this portion of our dialogue when we discuss The Expanse and discuss how we don't really care about our main character and we are incredibly enamored with our supporting cast. I will say I get you. I think that
do not compare Nick to James Holden.
Hey man, it's a bunch of things.
Remember the can't.
I think that it's fitting that we bring Seinfeld back up because there is an example of a hugely successful, wildly popular episodic show that exhibits intentionally and thoroughly zero growth through its entirety.
Absolutely.
I mean,
yep.
The show
100%.
ends the way it began. It is none of them are better. In fact, maybe if anything,
have you gone back and watched Seinfeld?
No, because hot take, I can't stand that show.
It's painful. So when I was in like middle school and it was on, I thought it was great. I loved it. I mean, and again, it's really good, snappy writing. Like it's good joke setup, good punchline. Jerry Seinfeld's very funny, and well cast. But yeah, I've gone back and tried to rewatch. It's painful. It's unpleasant to watch now.
I remember trying in high school, because we're of that age, to watch Seinfeld because I had teachers that thought it was the best. I couldn't stomach it. I didn't like it at all. Yep. I didn't understand why it was being watched. Maybe were I of an age at the time, it would have hit that same spot for me that New Girl has found, where I'm in that age. And these crisis of personality that the characters undergo with got me cookie, got you cookie. got me cookie, got you cookie. And the definitions of relationships that they experience would be more impactful, but I don't think that it's the audience that I would ever have been a part of, and that's fine. Everything that exists is somebody's favorite thing. This one, sure. I don't know why, man. It hit such a sweet spot for me. It really did. I would never argue that I think it's prestige television or that I think it's the pinnacle of comedy. I think it's a great example of the potential that a sitcom can have for humor's sake. On a fundamental level, I think that you and I went into this show with different expectations of what we wanted from an experience.
Here's my argument for why I think that, okay, so you look at something like Seinfeld, and people who enjoy it, not with any impression that the characters are growing or good people. They're actively not. That's the whole meta joke of the finale. But this, I don't think Seinfeld is the right comparison, because this is a show that that's obviously a romantic comedy. It's obviously intended to be the story of this relationship, and it's obviously the story of the relationship between Jess and Nick from the get-go. And so I guess it's more akin to like Friends or something like that.
They're still better than Ross and Rachel. Nick and Jess are better than Friends. Ross and Rachel.
Friends is terrible. It's awful. But the turning point in my opinion, a good romantic comedy comes when the characters who are supposed to be the romantic interest realize that the trick to being healthy with each other is to get out of their own heads, stop thinking exclusively about the fact that they want the other person, and begin thinking about what the other person wants. Yes, that's the last line of High Fidelity, and I'm not ashamed of it. High Fidelity and my sister are the reason I proposed to my wife. So go with it. But Nick and Jess never get there. At the end, Nick and Jess get married because Nick wants Jess and Jess wants Nick.
Yeah.
Like, there's not any, with Schmidt and Cece, you get this really, really supportive relationship. Supportive. This really mutually supportive relationship where, I mean, it is still a comedy. They still behave in ridiculous ways. I have no objection to this at all. I like Parks and Rec, guys. I'm not objecting to absurd behavior.
He's a community fan, for the record.
Yes. Right. Yes. So absurd behavior is not, I'm not offended by unrealistic behavior, except for the idea that Nick is a successful author. That the book is trash. The premise is bad. His reading of it is terrible.
I just want to know how Nixon crossed paths with Julius Pepperwood, and I want to read it. Don't know what to tell you.
Don't.
I want to know it.
Don't. Anyway. And so we see that with Cece and Schmidt. And you know what? If the series had ended with Cece and Schmidt's wedding, and we had decided that this was the story of how Cece and Schmidt got to that point, awesome. But everyone is constantly telling, Cece is constantly telling Jeff, Schmidt is constantly telling Nick, you're in love with Jess, you're in love with Jess, you're in love with Nick. And neither of them ever says, so stop being a narcissist.
Yeah. That's
the bummer for me, is you gave me a show where I'm supposed to see these two characters get from the place where they can't be together to the place where they can be together. And they get to a place where they can be together in a really toxic, unhealthy relationship.
Yeah. I
have no confidence that they'll be married in well, the show told me so, because we got the little forward flash thing with their kids playing True American, which was super cute. Again, no complaints about the technical side of this show. everything the show tries to do, it does
Every
well.
punch lands.
But the idea that these two characters make a successful life with each other is absolutely absurd.
I think that aspect was the most revealed to me when we discussed Ted Lasso, and I compared it to other sitcoms, because the Ted Hannah relationship, or Hannah's the actress, I don't remember the character's name, the owner of the team, their platonic friendship and chemistry between them is such a beautiful and wonderful and unique aspect that I kind of wish that we would have just kept Nick and Jess as great friends who tried and who then went on to just celebrate each other and celebrate friends like Schmidt and Cece finding 100%. Success.
If they had dated, broken up, and never again.
Will they, won't they? No, they shouldn't. Would have been a wonderful dynamic.
And this had been a picture of here's what a platonic friendship is and how it can be good. And it could be about them learning to be good friends, because there are occasions where they're good friends to each other. I'd be down. I'd be 100%. But the idea, like, it's like it was forced. It's like it was, well, it has to be about Nick and Jess getting together. So I guess that's what we're making. There are Ross and Rachel.
I was very excited when she was dating Robbie to see Nick as a bridesman at her wedding to Robbie and just celebrate them celebrating each other, because some of my closest friendships are with women that I am completely and eternally platonic with. And I have been a man of honor. Like I adore that this can exist in the world. And I'm with you on that. I will not offer any counterpoint because I don't like them together romantically. I like them together on a chemistry for comedy level.
And so the pitch of that is the climax of the show of Nick and Jess finally get together really left me on a down note with the show.
But that song is dope. And it was like a moment from Scrubs. Musically, they nail this show.
The show is very well done musically. I 100% agree.
We can at the very least end this with the full agreement that you probably won't feel like you wasted your time watching this show if you know what we have given you going in. And genuinely, this is a show to be celebrated on its achievement as a sitcom. They nail what they set out for. We are in disagreement as to whether or not we fundamentally enjoy what they set out for.
True.
I do appreciate you watching it, giving it a try, though.
Sure.
Philip, if people wanted to shout at you for not liking Friends or New Girl, where would they find you on the internet? Or if they agree with everything you said, what else do you do on the internet?
Well, if you like this, come watch me play Dungeons and Dragons.
Super related. Super related. The one pop culture thing New Girl did not touch on.
That's true. There's not a D&D episode of this. How is Schmidt not into D&D? Schmidt had to have at some point been
in college.
D&D.
Fat Schmidt should
and then abandoned.
D&D.
Yeah, Fat Schmidt should have. Yes, 100%. Nick probably belittled it out.
It was
of
Benjamin's fault. Benjamin.
That's probably true. Also, anyway, I know Winston. Winston would be a great DM.
I would love to play D&D with Winnie the Bish. Oh.
Yep, that's true. Anyway, you can see me playing D&D over on the Laughing Tree YouTube channel, where I'm the GM of a actual play called Kyber Shards. You can hear me playing RPGs on a podcast called Eberron Renewed, and then you can tweet at me at Laughing Tree Inn. Excuse me. You tweet at me at Laughing Tree Inn on Twitter, where I mostly tweet about RPGs. But sure, I mean, yeah, hit me up with some New Girl stuff. I'll
read it and disagree. If you want to find me on the internet, I'm basically everywhere at SorryBTR, where the O is a 0. And as you heard Philip say, I play the D&D on the YouTube. So check us out there. Thanks to the cast, the crew, the writers, everyone for making this show, which
y'all did a great job.
It is.
I don't know why you did some of the things you did, but you did them well.
It is a marvelously achieved and well accomplished sitcom. If you haven't, I do recommend you give it a try, because for this show, at least, it really hit the spot for half of us. Philip, thanks for watching. And for those of you listening, thanks for getting into it with us. We'll see you next time.